everyone, welcome to day 4 of the 3D asset tutorial series. Last time we was looking at the basic introduction of UV mapping and its theory and how it works. From this point on, I'll be talking about how I unwrap a certain asset and my workflow to complete that UV unwrap. Everyone has their own way of unwrapping a certain UVs, and depending on the object depends on the workflow. A cube will require like a different kind of workflow because of its shape, where a cylinder kind of shape would require a different kind of workflow. So if you come to this tutorial halfway and haven't watched the previous tutorials, please refer to my website. I say this sort of my videos. My website is www.andrewbooth3d.com. As I said before, there's a lot of content. Do look at it because it's very educational. And halfway in the website is the videos that I've done in the past, so you can still follow along. Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do to this asset, since I already projected a UV based on a planar map, it's just to tidy out the UVs and make sure it's tidy in the UV editor. Now what I do after this process, I go in and actually cut in my scenes and where I want them to be placed based off my final result and how I want the model to look. So I do this by going edge and just simply double clicking on the edge loop to where I want the scenes. Just double clicking on every single edge where I want the scene. That's all you do, just double clicking on every edge where you want it to be cut. Now I'm going to cut along here because of how it indents here. It's better to cut along here and here to have two separate maps. Two separate shells. For the reason being I'm doing that is to do with distortion and how it unwraps. Also, I'll cut along here. Normally when it's a bevel edge, I don't go to this edge, to the inner edge. I come to the second edge loop. The reason I do that is so I can planar map that shell separately, and that will be part of the planar. Also, the scene will come above here. You could come from here and the scene will be hidden, but I liked it to be here so that when you pick it up, this will be the same texture underneath, and it continues onto here. It's hardly noticeable, but it's all about justification, justifying it. So once I selected all the edge loops on the model, I simply press this. This is the knife tool. Well, actually the proper name is separate tool. It separates the UVs I call it a knife tool, it's easier to call it that. And as you can see, it's cut along all the edges that I want. I'm also going to insert another edge here. You probably ask yourself, why am I cutting there? Surely there's going to be a seam going to be placed there. Yes, sure, there is going to be a seam, but the trick is to make sure it's not to be seen and it's hidden within the texture. A good texture would mean it's hidden. So sometimes it's not matter. The reason being I'm doing it from there is so I can planar map it here, at this shell here. Now, the rest of these parts here are going to be cylindrical. Now you're probably asking, why didn't I not cut along the line here? Well, when you do the projection for cylinder, it automatically puts that in for you. So it will delete it anyway and creates a new scene somewhere else. So by doing that, you know, by not doing that, it saves you time, basically. So from this point on, it's all about going through and unwrapping each piece, each shell, till it's completed. I do it by going UV, then UV shell, and it allows me to select each shell individually, like so. So it's all a case of going in, clicking on it, and then UV, planar. As you can see, it projects it, and then it projects it to a certain direction, as I just explained last time. In the editor here, you have the conventional transform and rotation tools. It's all about squaring off. I like to go 4 to 4 inch, and then rotating the projection. I like to take that to 0, and then rotate on the X, or sorry, one direction on the X, which is here. You're probably thinking, how do I know which is which? What is X, Y, and Z? Well, if you look here, it says X, Y, and Z on the top of here. This is due to the location of the world, but in Maya, the location X, Y, and Z in all fields are uniform. So that's always going to be X, that's always going to be Y, and that's always going to be Z. Now, as you can see, it's red. That's because the UV shell is back to front. To correct that, you can easily flip it using this tool here, this button here, and it flips it to blue. But an easy way when you're at this stage is just to go -90, and it automatically flips it to the correct position, so it's always blue up. And then I click this button here. This is the move UV shell tool. Basically, you click on it and you click on a shell, and it allows you to move the actual shell, the UVs of the shell. Now, from this point on, you probably think, oh, it's done. The question is, no, it isn't. Although you projected it evenly across the planar map, it's not actually flat. It's got a little bit of a curve to it, and because it's curved, the UV isn't correct, not in proportion to the actual model. So it requires what we call unfolding. You're required to unfold all shells correctly. You do this by going to Polygon and then, oh, sorry about that, it's the one menu, it's Tools and then Smooth UVs. And you've got two options here, relax and unfold. You just click and drag and it unfolds it. And as soon as you can do it until it stops, and then if you still can't unwrap it correctly, just click on the relax and pull it. It may look distorted, but it gives you the chance, it relaxes the UVs to give you more freedom to click the unfold again and it unfolds it further. Now I don't need to do that because it was already unfold correctly, but you do on that process on certain shells that can't be unwrapped so easily, unfold so easily. So you just repeat it and repeat until you're satisfied with the actual UV map. When you come to a face like this, it's not so bad because it's more flat. This bit here is flat. So when you click on UV planar and do the same thing to the top, you'll notice you get this. That's because Maya is trying its hardest to justify and calculate it, and it's fallen short in its calculations. So it's going on in an infinite number of 0.101. You just square it off and bring it back to normal. As you notice, you don't need to go -90 because it's already on its correct direction, which is always handy, so do pay attention to that. As you can tell on the model, you got a little bit of distortion around here and here. The reason you got that distortion is because you're trying to unwrap a flat surface in a cylindrical way. Now, in terms of 3D models, it's all about justification. A distortion like that is not so bad. The reason I say it's not so bad is because when you deal with distortion and controlling that distortion, it's about where you want the distortion to be placed. To me, having it around the corners there is not so bad, but when you map it using a cylindrical mapping around here and attach it to here, you'll get this an even worse distortion that distorts around here, pushing it and pulling it and compressing it into the center, and it's ugly. So like I say, when you unwrapping your UVs, it's all about justification and what worked best and controlling that distortion. You will never completely get rid of the distortion, but you can reduce it. You can reduce it. Now on this one it's not so bad because, like I said, it's flat, but it's always a good practice to always smooth the UVs out. Always a good idea. If you keep going into the tool menu and you already used it previously, just click G. You cannot always do that because it may not always be the last tool you use, but it's always handy to. Next I'm now going to show you how I actually unwrap a cylindrical map. I always click the shell, click the actual shell, UV and cylindrical. What I tend to do, I always pull this to the end. I always drag the two ends together. The reason I do that is because when it's over here, you're only mapping half of it. Now, depending on your actual cylinder and what you unwrapping, it's not so bad. But when you're doing a full circle like that, it's always handy to do that. Also, what I like to do, I like to increase the height of the map to be the same size as the model, and then move it so it will fit that model. The reason I'm doing that is for UV proportion. UV proportion, because at the moment it's always good to have that kind of proportion. It's like a crystal clear kind of indication that it's almost unwrapped. On small objects like that, you can never tell if it's correctly UV mapped. The only way you probably can see if you increase the size of the shell drastically, so it's like that. And as you can see, it's near perfect, because if it wasn't, they will be distorted. It won't be a square kind of shape. Now, one thing to bear in mind, you'll never truly get a true distortion-free shell on a cylinder. But again, it's always about controlling that distortion. See, like here, you can see it's compressing here. So you can always get away with it by pulling in the anchor. As you can see, it's distributing it evenly. It's compressing the actual UVs together. Another thing I like to do is unwrapping it on this, unfolding it, but not the conventional way that I showed you a minute ago. On here, what I tend to do, I tend to select all the inner UVs, right click, and then click polygons and unfold. You have two menus, unfold 3D and then legacy. 3D is like automatic. It's very handy if you do it that way. And legacy is the old version of the unfold tool. I like to use the legacy because it has constraints, unwrap constraints, unfold constraints, sorry. And you have two menus, horizontal and vertical. This unfolds all the UVs on that axis equally. Vertical would unfold all the UVs vertically up and down, and equally it's the same on horizontal. I like to click apply. By doing that, it just distributes the UVs evenly according to the actual mapping, to the actual model, which is always handy to do. Since this is a small object, it's too large, as you can tell. as you can tell, it's too large, and it's simple of just scaling it back down again. But don't worry about the size, because we will be laying out the UVs when the unwrapping is complete. By laying it out, it scales each UV shells proportionally to the model, and it ensures that all shells are correct size. So now I'll move on to the next shell, which is here, and then U3 cylinder, and you just repeat the process again, this time with a bigger piece. It can be a pain to select the anchor, but once you get there, it's done. As you can see, it lines the scene up with the previous cylinder map. This is what I was referring to at the beginning of this session. The reason I didn't do that, because it automatically does it for you. Again, I size the projection equally to the actual model. Sometimes it could be a pain to correct and get proportionally correct. As you can see, it's done not a bad job. You can see stretching and distortion, but we'll correct that. Now, another thing about UV mapping, it's all about having the UVs to reflect what a similar shape to what it looks like on the model. When it comes to cylinders, it's not going to be curled like that, because basically you're unwrapping it and unfolding it, so it unfolded, it does look straight like that, so it does not reflect the actual model. If you did, you would have to pull these bits out like so. Something similar like that, of course correctly and properly. I just done it by eyeballing it. But when you get to around here, it near enough corrects the proportion and the distortion, but it creates an awful distortion around here, around the scene. Again, it's all about what you want and controlling that distortion. To me, I believe that is ugly, and I personally don't like that. So I always like to have it perfect like that, so you don't see it as much, and the distortion is distributed evenly across the model, opposed to on one specific scene, and it reduces it. Once you've done that, I always make sure these edges are always straight. By doing that, you click these align these buttons here. These align UVs to the maximum, to the highest point. In other words, let's say this point is up here, and I select all this edge and I click that button. All these will align to that point, to the highest point. As you can see, it straightens them out. I like to do that to make sure that the UV edge line is actually straight, like so. Sometimes you can do a cylindrical map and it's not always this straight, and you have to do it yourself. Next, I like to do the same process like I did in the smaller strip by going to polygons, unfold, and then click on the horizontal one and apply. You don't see much done on this particular one because the UVs were evenly distributed. Sometimes they're not, but what I tend to do now on is do it across horizontally on the vertical side. I didn't do it in the strip because it's just one strip, but if I done it on the one strip, it'll distort the UVs and it would not look good. So click on the vertical, and this will distribute the UVs evenly across the vertical axis using the constraints. So apply. As you can see, it really changed it, and as you can see, it done not a bad job on the actual unfold of the main model. As you can see, you've got little issues here and there of distortion. They're not perfect squares, but you can never get rid of them. It's all about justification, justifying it, and if you know you're going to have distortion somewhere else, and by doing this reduce it in other areas, it's like a trade-off. Do you want the distortion at this particular location or at that location? Now, what I like to do when I'm not happy at a particular fold, like here, this bit here is too wide in comparison to the rest. I like to select the UVs up to that point, like so, and then just pulling it in. As you can see, it's drastically improved it. Now, to me, that is very well done in UV mapping. To me, I personally believe that you cannot get a better unwrap. You may be able to tinker it by doing that and making it slightly better. And then if you do that, you just had to edit these bits, these 8 bits, to reflect that, the change. But again, it's all about controlling the distortion and how you want it to look. When you in the hole as a UV, that does not look too bad as a unwrapped UV, and I can live with that. So now let's do another one, but in reverse. The indentation here, same thing, just UV cylindrical, and it's all about doing the same process again and again. It may get a bit tedious, but it's a task that has to be done, especially when you unwrapping when you're actually going to come to texturing. A really bad UV map can result to a really bad texture sheet, and in game that does not look good at all. It really don't. I cannot stress enough about good UVs, because a good UV always means a good texturing, and a good texturing always equal a good model. Now, as you can see here, the scene is slightly off compared to the rest of the scenes. It's simply just a case of rotating it. You do it by clicking this little triangle button here and clicking the circle button here, and it brings out the rotating transform on the projection, and you just simply rotate it until it matches the scene line of the rest of the shells. So from this point on, it's all about the same process again. Going to the UVs, sorting them out, align them and unfolding the constraint across the constraint of vertical, and then again on the horizontal. To me, that's not bad, but to improve it, I will scale it across the y-axis. Well, in this case, x. And the reason I'm doing it, I feel that these squares are a little stretched, and it's a simple case of just pulling it along the axis. Now you're probably thinking, why am I not using any of these tools? Now, it's all down to personal preferences. I personally don't like these tools. I'm old school. I like to unwrap my UVs using the smooth tool, and then unfolding it using this option here. When it comes to UV mapping, I'm old school. But these are the new techniques. By unfolding it interactively, you just select it and it interactively unwraps it using the tools up here. Again, it's all down to personal preference. You can use them if you feel that they are more comfortable to use, but they're not my area. Also, what you're noticing when I'm unwrapping my UVs, I'm unwrapping them and pulling them across to another UV page. The reason being I'm doing this is to give myself room. When you unwrap your UVs on the default square, which is UV 1 by 1, it's all constraint. So when you move it into an overset to a certain UV, like so, it just pulls it back, and it restrains it by having it outwards, out the actual page. It doesn't constrain you, and it's useful for that when you want to move your shells and to control them and all that business. It's all about control on that side. Now it's time to continue, and again you just follow the same process again. Now at this point, because I'm halfway through, I like to go to File and just save my scene, just in case it freezes or my work and it crashes, or I done something I don't like doing and I can reopen it. And I stress again, like I did in the last video, always save your work more regularly. I haven't been doing it because I haven't been doing it throughout this tutorial, because it's only been like 30 minutes or so, it's only been a short amount of time. So the amount of work that I've done so far, I don't mind doing it again because it's easily replicated. But it's like a silly way of seeing it, but I do like to tell you, do not forget to save, because if your work crashes, at least you got a backup and you can do it. So now it's time, like I said, to move on to the next shell and just UV center map, and a simple case of UV mapping it and scaling it to the actual model, just like the previous shells. Again, I like to stress that it can get a bit tedious. Line it up to the other scenes. And you have a good unwrap. If you follow these tutorials, you cannot go wrong, because I've been taught by industry standard mentors. My tutor that taught me at university, he was been in the games industry for 10 years, and all my knowledge came from him. So this is really needed. I stress again, do follow these tutorials. I will say that no one is correct. There is not always a correct workflow. Everyone has their own preferences and how they work. Like my workflow is slightly different to his, and his be more professional for obvious reasons, especially of his history and past. But when it comes down to it, it's all to do with the way you like to work. And it's just a simple case of just repeating the same process again and again until it's completed. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. You will come into times when you'll find problems, errors, and sometimes it's always the case. If you cannot solve a particular issue, just research into it. This software is brilliant, but it's not perfect. It will create errors. There will be errors, and it's all to do with a lot of it is human error. Some of it is software error. But if an error does arise, research it on Google. Believe it or not, a lot of the industry, it's about problem solving, and it's all about puzzles, really. It's one of the reasons being I like this kind of industry and why I'm passionate about it. So just simply repeat it again and again. Yeah, as you can see, it's distorted it along here. So it's all a case of reducing that distortion, making it better, decreasing it when it's necessary. Like here, you see it's not perfect square, it's squashed. So you just simply pull it in. If you pull it in, it pulls this outwards. So again, to me that's done that side. Now it's time to work on here. These ones are going to be small. They're going to be small, especially when it comes to the actual texturing. Now, when I click on the shell, it's selecting the whole thing. That means there's a particular area, like an edge, that's not actually cut up properly. So it's all about finding the edge. The best way to do it is go into your wireframe by clicking that, and you can easily find it because the borders are a deeper, bolder colour compared to the rest, and you can find that this is the edge that's not cut up. Just simply select it and then cut it, and then once you've done that, you find that it's cut up correctly this time. Just planar again, like I did in the other tops and bottom, just flatten out. Now, like the previous top, it's going to be red. That's because of its mapping and the direction of it. To flip it around, just -90, and it's done it correctly. Now, I don't need to smooth the UVs because it's flat and it's no edge loops, it's just straight cutting, which means that is correctly unwrapped. But once you get into a shell like this, I'm going to be honest with you, there's going to be distortion. This is not a lot of geometry or polygons to get rid of that distortion. But again, it's about reducing it. You're going to find that there's going to be distortion along this edge loop here and along here, base loop. You know, just simply center the map and again find if it's the same edge, which it isn't. So in the case of just rotating it, there. As you can see, you've got distortion just like I predicted. Again, that is because of the actual shape of it, but it's all about reducing that distortion. And this is what this entire process is all about, reducing the distortion and unwrapping it correctly. As you can see, I done it incorrect. I've done the horizontal. Do be careful on that, because if you select the middle ones first and you click horizontal, it will pull along here on the edge loops here and it will distort it. So do be careful to select vertical when you do the inner shells like that, and then horizontal when you click that. As you can see, it's really badly distorted here. It's just a simple case of correcting it basically and sort out the distribution of the UVs. The reason it's done like that is because this edge here is too this, it's not that edge, it's this edge here. It's because this edge is too far upwards. Just bring it down slightly. As I said before, this tool is good, but it's not perfect. And there you are, it's unwrapped. When you zoom in, it looks like it's got a lot of distortion, it's terrible, but it's not. It's justified. And in relative to space, you don't see it. You really don't see that distortion because the distance of it. Again, and also because of the size of that area in proportion to that actual model, it's going to be small on the UV editor. So don't worry about the distortion on that one. Again, it's distortion and control that distortion. We come around here and do this last shell. And just repeating the process. That's all it is. Just repeating the same process again and again. It can get tedious, but that is how it is, I'm afraid. Not many people enjoy UV mapping when it's a lot to unwrap, but I personally enjoy it. It's one of my things that I do like enjoying. I do like doing while creating the actual model. It's one of the asset, you know, it's one of the things that fascinate me. Again here, it's incorrect here. Now you're probably wondering, why is it distorting there when the rest is perfect? It's because the edges here, the border, UV borders are constrained, and you're sizing the edge loop UVs to the constraint. It's okay when it's flat like here, but once it goes in the dip, it can't justify that location, that shape, because it's constrained along this edge here. So you justify it by moving this edge loop so it's more square and more controlled on the distortion. Now, as you can see, I made a little error. Even the most professional 3D artists will do errors like this. It's because I didn't, pay attention to the projection, rotation. When you have this here, how it cuts along here and it throws off the steam. It's easy fixed by clicking the edge loop and then cutting it. And then it's the case of just rejoining this edge here. You do it by using this tool here, moving so. What it will do, it will move this individual shell to the end of this shell here, and then sew it together, like so. And then it's, from that point on, it's just about editing it and making sure it fits in proportion. It's perfect, so you don't need to worry about that. To me, the actual salt dispenser is fully unwrapped and it's correct. Now, from this point, oh, there is one bit we forgot to do. I just noticed that little bit here. It's easy done, everyone do it. Just, again, UV shell and cylinder. It's tedious to always do it, and it's easy. It's really easy to forget pieces like that. Because they're so small. As you can see, not much needs to be done because of a single cylinder. There's more case of just taking the distortion away, like so. Now that is one correct UV unwrapped UV model here. To check for distortion, take off the check map and click this distortion. As you can see, it's a lot better. You've got less blue here. Now, you're probably thinking, why is there a lot of red? Red means distortion in red and blue. All the red and blue indicate that there's distortion and stretching going on. Well, the fact is there isn't. The reason being it's showing up there is because of the size. These are too big or too small in proportion to the model. If you go UV and then decrease the size from, you can see it gets deeper in colour because you're compressing it, but the more bigger you make it, it actually takes away the colour. That's because it's all about the data. When you unwrap these UV, you're unwrapping the data. Basically, the smaller you are, the more compressed the information becomes, the more darker coloured these become. So when it comes to this point, it's not about the distortion, because they ain't got no distortion. I mean, how can that be distorted when it's flat? Same for that. It's purely the size of the UVs in comparison to the actual model. Now, another thing you'd be wondering is, okay, this process is good, but what if I got a lot of models, or, a lot of assets in a scene? Well, don't fret. This may be a long process, but you can do it this way. It's more precise and precision, but there is a quicker way of doing it. Autodesk offer a free bonus tools, free to download. And once you download it, it has extra tools, especially in UV editing, and it comes with, if I can find it, auto unwrap UVs tool. And basically it's a tool that you enter, and all you do is click on the edge loops like I did at the beginning, where I cut up the seams. You basically do that same process again. You just select where you want the seam to be, and you generate, and it generates the UV layout, scale, and even a perfect set of UVs to those specific scenes that you specify. It's not always going to be perfect, but it's handy when you've got a lot of assets, particularly ones that is just there for show, and it's not being interactive. It's not interactive kind of asset, and it's really good for assets that are like for distance, that the player cannot reach, but they still have to be modelled to contain that information in the actual scene. It means that the UVs don't have to be perfect, but it's good to have them. So it will wrap up this actual this tutorial. I will now go and save the scene. I'll save the scene. Now, as you can see, it's cut off a single triangle here. The reason being that's happened is because I had a certain area selected in the faces, and I clicked this button, and it isolated it. Just re-click that button, and it takes you back. If you ever come to that kind of area anymore. So next week, well, not next week, tomorrow, I'll be discussing about UV layout, why a good layout is ideal for texturing, texture space. I'll be telling you about how you can overlap certain geometry if it's going to have the same texture. I will even explain to you about how this relates to texture, and all the different textures. I may touch into that as well. So until next time, I bid you a goodbye.